Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Rare Earth Exchanges podcast. Today, we're diving deep into the global battle for rare earth exchanges and supremacy and battles and all that. So, Daniel, today we're
Yeah,
talking about a complex landscape with where every mineral matters, where the stakes can be higher. What do you think about what's been going on this week?
I think, Dustin, every mineral matters. And we are in a situation where we're starting to hear quite a bit about minerals. We heard President Trump talk about Ukraine and potentially us accessing some of their rare earths. There's some details there we can go into that they're more critical minerals, not rare earth. And some of the main minerals are in the Donbass region, which is not where Ukraine controls, but Russia controls. But that's a detail that we don't have to get into now. I think the main thing to talk about is critical minerals. Okay, rare earths are elements and they can make up minerals, but critical minerals is a much bigger category. And as we've been discussing, writing about in rare earth exchanges and talking about on our new podcast, this matters. And China controls globally the critical mineral value chain. There was a
Okay, so speaking of China, let's talk about their latest power play. We have an article that they've invested 57 billion to lock down the mineral resources across the globe. What do you think their end game is?
okay, and just to clarify, that 57 billion via 26 state-owned backed financial institutions, that's over 2 decades. Okay, that was a report from A Data at William Mary a university, and that, just to provide some context, that article discussed this intricate web of government financing companies and the ability to long-term control key resources essential for energy transition, from lithium and cobalt to nickel, copper, and of course rare earth elements. So that being said, China has spent 56 billion at least. There's 26 state-backed entities that are part of this control. Let's get into the key question. I'm sorry, Dustin, just again is,
What do you think their end game is? Like, why so much money
okay, so the
to
end
lock it
game,
down?
as we've discussed in one of our articles, we translated some reports over there that really delineated their end game, really in plain language. Number one, the monopolization or quasi monopolization of rare earths, but also more broadly critical minerals, is to lock down and be able to innovate around the next level of value added production. So magnets, they control about 80% of various high tech magnets, all kinds of other products, optical products, inputs that are into military systems, defense systems, electric vehicles. We've talked about BYD, how they're actually emerging as the biggest electric car company in the world. So the end game then is more money, accumulate more capital based on this core monopoly, and then ultimately emerge as a governor or an overseer over the world's digital currency. They want to be at that table. It's delineated, it's clear where they're going, and they're executing. I have to say, they have a long game and they execute, Dustin.
That isn't great. That's crazy and very impressive, honestly, that they've had such the foresight. And probably just to add, they state-backed businesses and all of that. They're also investing outside the country as well. So they're extending their reach, not just from an industry resource perspective, but like in Congo, Peru, Indonesia, they're getting their fingers into all kinds of places to
It,
establish this dominance.
it's an octopus with global tentacles through an aggressive acquisition strategy, right?
Hmm.
Um, it has left host countries in a precarious position because the Chinese financing helps them develop these mines, okay, which without assuming significant financial risk, it limits the share of the long-term profits and weakens the national control over those strategic resources. Malaysia's another example. They're trying to kind of be independent through various Chinese credit, finance institutional engagements, it might limit how independent they can become. In 2/3 of the cases we found around the world where the Chinese are employing this strategy, about 2/3 of the cases, governments had little to no ownership in these projects. This raises concerns about sovereignty, economic sustainability, and groups like mining.com, other fine media publications and online resources have talked about this. At mining.com, it was Cecilia Jamasme, who was a reporter that talked about that.
Cool. It's all very interesting, truly, but let's kind of shift gears just a little bit and talk about what is the United States doing as counter strategy? What are some of the challenges they have, knowing that China's got their octopus tentacles of global dominance here? I mean, we got things like lack of processing infrastructure. We're still dependent on the Chinese supply chain. But we have some hope in things like, emerging technologies for Phoenix tailings, for zero emissions processing. So anyways, what are your thoughts on what the US is doing right now?
Well, Dustin, what we've been finding in our reporting, our research, the U.S. is in a far more precarious position than any of our leaders would like to admit. In fact, we often look at this problem with what we like to think of as a free market lens, where, hey, we can have a few government agencies that help some companies either innovate through recycling or open up some more mines, or maybe even Donald Trump is able to negotiate Greenland, right? And there's a huge trove of critical mineral, and rare earth deposits. But the problem is, it's not a free market solution in the short to intermediate run. Maybe in the long run it is, because the marketplace, it really is supreme when we talk about economic activity. But remember, China, which is a communist country, they use capitalism, but it's a communist country. They've controlled these resources. They control the market. So unless in the West, namely starting with the United States, unless we really recognize what this problem is and employ a strategy that has the scale to start to overcome the Chinese model. So what that means is alliances. So we need very tight alliances, which may run counter to how President Trump is looking at relations today. Even with neighbors like Canada, there's tariffs and things like that, potential tariffs, which can throw a monkey wrench in this. But so we need tight alliances that are committed to overcoming this octopus, okay? Number two is innovation. So we need, at different phases of the supply chain or the value chain, we need disruption. So for example, the technology that might allow us to recycle rare earths out of existing metal. The challenge there is right now only about 1% of all magnets, for example, come from recycling. So we got a long way to go. But we still need to keep pushing forward. Another area is open up mines. So we do need supply. There's very little surplus supply because the Chinese control much of the refined products today. So that distorts the market. Again, it's not a free market, really. So opening up mines, Greenland, for example, that is important. It's just not going to solve the problem. It's a much bigger. It's a much bigger initiative that will help overcome the problem. Another area that we see unfolding, is going to be the refining. So bringing back refining, learning it. We need to concentrate knowledge. We need some kind of universities to start teaching that again, or some kind of hub. There's a company called the Mountain Pass Mine, MP Materials. They are doing some refining. They're starting to do some refining in Texas. That's a start. But still, a large percentage of their product that they dig out of the ground, they ship to China to this day. This is, again, the biggest rare earth mine in the United States, Mountain Pass Mine in California, in southeastern California. So and another area that we really need to address is the government bureaucracy. So there are many different agencies that are involved with regulating aspects of mining: Department of Energy, Bureau of Interior. Internal Bureau. My mind is not there, but I'll get it. And EPA, you name it. There's several agencies, so we have to streamline that process, right? We have to be efficient. We probably need like a mineral czar that lines up all of the agencies so that they become much more efficient and responsive. And then we need to look at the environmental, implications. I mean, a lot of this rare earth mining is messy, and so there's a lot of issues that we need to look at, but we need to start looking at it as we've seen.
Absolutely. So just a thought I had, do you think the solution for us is fight an octopus with an octopus, like take the Chinese approach and create our own version of that? Or do you think the way the US has done business is the solution?
I mean, that's such a good question, Dustin. And again, we're still learning. I'm still learning. I don't think that's going to be the answer. I don't think we have the political wherewithal. I don't think we want to spend that kind of money. I may be wrong. I think one intriguing possibility that we talked about or we wrote about is President Trump, who he let's give him credit where credit's due. I mean, he is a serious deal maker. Like love him or not like him, the guy is unorthodox. He goes and does things that a lot of presidents in that role won't think about. I could see Trump. If we were advising Trump, we might say, "Hey, listen, President Trump, what about a creative deal with China itself? Because they need us, we need them. It could be, we get 20 years of certainty, and in exchange, they get certainty on certain market access. Now, can you really trust the Chinese? I mean, there's a bunch of questions that are raised, but I mean, we've been doing business. President Nixon went over there and opened it up in '73, somewhere around there. I think it was '73. It could have been '74. But we helped China grow. It was capitalist markets that brought them to where they're at. Why don't we? So that's a pathway. But there's a lot of nationalism that we've talked about, and that was a topic for this podcast. And economic nationalism is becoming more and more pronounced in different countries. And some of the people are getting a little bit more hardened. And it may be not acceptable for the American people for Donald Trump to say, hey, I want to go over to China and do a deal. A lot of pressure may be on him to say, let's beat them, right? I don't know. I'm just saying, and peace, business, prosperity for me is always the best option. But finally, just to answer this question, another approach is what we're working on. As rare earth exchanges, I mean, we have plans. We have ambitious plans. We have plans to bring the world's information in this topic together first in a compelling website that you've developed. That's amazing. And number one. Number two, we're working on a project now where we're mapping all of the mines and processing and everything else into a very compelling, concentrated environment. And then third is we're going to start looking at our software development capability and looking at market functionality that can help bring together networks of mines, refiners, processors, refiners, and producers, the magnet producers, what have you, bring them some efficiency. So piece together over time, there's very compelling things that we can do, but it's going to need orchestration at the President Trump level and collaboration with other countries if we want to ultimately take on the octopus in a viable way
And sustainable,
and sustainable. Yeah.
right? Honestly, I mean, we're only going to have President Trump for 4 years, and this is going to last for much longer than that. Um, so
So we
yeah,
need
it needs
him
to
to
be
get moving.
sustainable. Yeah, no time to waste. So, but anyway, so that's a great segue into kind of the next sort of topic of things that kind of were highlighted throughout the week of emerging technologies and the hope that is there for just mining, refining, and recycling. So, a few of the things that were brought up: sodium ion battery research, electrokinetic mining breakthroughs, and recycling innovations from companies like Makengo Resources. Any thoughts on what those mean for rare earths and critical minerals?
Well, one of the things, as you know, we're trying to do is we're scouring studies out there, both early research to more advanced research to commercialization efforts, so there's a value chain of innovation. And so we're trying to understand what are the various breakthroughs, technologies, processes that can United States, the West, use access rare earths or even use alternative products which allow us to be more independent from, for example, China. And so in our articles, I mean, some of these are very complicated, and frankly, I don't, it takes me time to read through and really understand the
Oh, yeah.
implications. So I think some of like the one, sorry, can you pronounce it again? I'm having trouble. Electrokinetic.
Yeah. Electrokinetic mining.
Yeah, electrokinetic mining, that's sort of early stage research, and I don't see, commercialization um, prospects, but in that study, we see what's valid, what's validated, and what's possible. And so, um, a reason to go to rare earth exchanges, if you're interested in these topics, is that we're looking at these studies. And a lot of these studies come out of China. They come from many all over the world, and we're trying to grapple with understanding it. We have a network of experts that we'll reach out to get some support, and then we're summarizing these in a way that are consumable. So I think there are some appealing things. You mentioned Phoenix Tailings. They've been raising money. They're, I think, a spinoff out of MIT, or they're MIT graduates, and they're in New England, and they're working on recycling technologies. So in that way, you would not necessarily be dependent on the actual rare earths, on the mines, because you're recycling. So again, only about 1% of rare earth magnets today, I believe, that's the number I've seen quite a bit, is 1%. That's not very much, but it's a start. And so again, what we're trying to do is break down the different science in the innovation pipeline and figure out, what elements have more feasibility that can eventually be commercialized. So that's something I'm very excited about, that we continue to track those that news. And I want to stress that a lot of our news is original news. It's not aggregation. We do quite a bit of aggregation where we look to news out there in this area, this topical area, and we try to see what are they not saying. So we try to add value to that particular news, and we refer back to whoever wrote it, and we also provide our hopefully value added position. A lot of our articles in the area that you're mentioning, Dustin, are original news because they're just obscure studies that nobody's ever looked at. They get published in some scientific journal, and we read through it, and we put an article together that kind of summarizes it in a way that's digestible. So uh, hopefully that was helpful in the answer. Again, it's we can do an episode on a specific technology and what's the status, and I think that would be a value if people want to hear about it.
Yeah. So if that is, so to those who are listening to our podcast, leave us a comment in the comments below and tell us what you'd be interested in learning more about. But to summarize some of these innovations that are coming out, I think it highlights that even though we're in the beginning stages, it's going to take a long time for some of these things to become mainstream, which just adds to the long-term play that is kind of the limitation with some of what we're dealing with. So, Daniel, let's transition just a little bit to kind of wrap up the show. Let's talk about some geopolitical implications, right? I mean, Trump's been in office for a couple weeks now, and boy, is he making some waves, you know?
Wow.
So,
Yeah, I'd say.
what do you think's going on? It's a hot topic.
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, at one level, you just have to sit back and say, wow, we've never seen anything like this. It's unprecedented. And I get what they're trying to do, and I do appreciate the effort because we're in debt. We're sort of mired in a status quo. So I appreciate the unorthodox and aggressive approach that President Trump is taking. Now, I would say that the critical mineral piece is pretty important. There's more and more news with this topic. There's, Donald Trump himself, President Trump has mentioned, Greenland, Ukraine now. I think it's on his mind and it's on the cadre of people, or at least some of his people, it's on their mind. So, do they truly understand what the problem is? Because again, what we found is that much of the news out there only, I don't want to say it's misinformation, it's not, it's just partial information. So, and I think there's a lot of people that are trying to monetize this situation, whether they're in mining or in the downstream magnets or what have you. And so I just think that it's an unfolding topic. I think we're well positioned to provide real value by trying to be as holistic and honest and candid as possible, and hopefully we'll make an impact.
Yeah, that's all we can do. Sit and watch. I think it's so much of it's just unfolding. Mexico, Canada, China, they've all announced retaliation against what's going on. Everyone, I think, has their own opinion about what that impact might look like, whether it's valid or not. But either way, it's causing waves. People are definitely rethinking where materials are coming from
Oh yeah.
and
Oh
what we
yeah.
pay for them. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I know. I think it's, you said sit back. I mean, I'm, in some ways I'm elated. I'm excited to live at this time under these circumstances because I think you and I are similar in that we want to make something good happen. We want to add value. We love our country. We love the world too. We love the world too. We love all people. It's just we have to take care of ourselves too. We have to make sure we're vibrant. And even the Chinese, I mean, we appreciate what they're doing in the sense that we have, we're like, wow, look at that. Look at that long term vision. But we have to take care of ourselves too. So I think that some good things are going to happen here. I really do. But we need to put your seatbelt on.
Isn't famous last words. We'll leave it at that. All right, Daniel, let's wrap up here. And if you're to just kind of sum everything up, put everything into perspective, what's the biggest highlight for you this last week? Yeah,
I think the biggest highlight for me, and again, it's a biased opinion, but I think it's President Trump and his mentioning of critical minerals and an awareness that's, I think, going to grow. Greenland, Ukraine, the tariffs, I think the Chinese situation, that this topic is becoming more prominent. And it's an important topic. It's one reason why we started this venture. So it's going to be exciting.
absolutely. Yeah, I for me the highlight is Trump's interest in rare earths and critical minerals from other countries. I mean, we've heard Greenland, we've heard Ukraine, obviously we've heard China, and to me it just seems unheard of. Like, why all of a sudden are we interested in rare earths as a country at an executive level? I think that's very, very unique and will be interesting to watch.
Dust, a last comment. What I like about it, again, I've always been fascinated with geology and mineralogy, always. And as a kid, I collected minerals. We talked about this. I used to go in old mines. And for me, it's fascinating. Like, if you look at the West, we live in Utah. I'm from California originally, but the old mines that you can find driving across the deserts and mountains of the Great Basin into California. And you look at history and how these mines and these earth products built, they're the foundational pieces to build a whole industrial revolution. And these rare earths are like the same building blocks, the same type of building block for the most advanced technologies. And yet, at the core level, they're in the ground, they come out, and there are environmental issues and there are economic issues, but I think it's bringing us back to some very basic principles, and I think we have to go back and we have to learn some of this stuff, and we have to bring it back here and have schools teach it, and it's a process where we have to become productive again in ways that we sort of have lost.
And that will be the challenge of society, right? To step up to the plate. So with that, I think we should sign off here, Daniel. We'll thank everyone for tuning in to our podcast for this week, talking about events and things that were highlighted throughout the week. Join us next week. We're going to talk more about events and news that have broken that appears on our website, Rare Earth Exchanges. And we'll see you guys next week.
Visit rareearthexchanges.com.